G'day guys and gal. When the Emperor was designing the Space Marine legions and even Primarchs, he wasn't trying to build a tier list to ensure one legion was better than the others. He wanted a diverse, flexible arrangement of armies that could overcome any obstacle. Some situations that the Raven Guard would struggle with would be perfect for the Iron Hands. Some wars that the Sons of Horus would suffer greatly in would be perfect for the Night Lords, and so on. Now naturally, this did end up creating a bit of a power ranking, as the legions with the more niche skills were overshadowed by the Dark Angels, Ultramarines, and Sons of Horus, but the idea was solid. However, whilst each legion's strength and purpose was obvious, their weaknesses were less so. Weaknesses that could be massively exploited to tip the scale. So I thought it'd be interesting to check out each Space Marine legion's greatest weakness. Before we get started, the Natty Plus Supplements Black Friday sale is live, up to 45% off store-wide. Now I know a lot of you guys are curious about the supplements and what they can actually do for you, but maybe you don't trust it or you don't think the price tag is worth it. I strongly believe that the right supplement in the right context at the right dose can have a huge impact on your health and how you feel, but I'll let them speak for themselves. Our test booster gave this guy a 30% increase in testosterone, this guy got a 50% increase, and this guy got a 77% increase. That is huge. The estrogen reduction reduced my estrogen by 60 points, and as a result of that, I'm now horny all the time, which is a bit distracting but also a lot of fun. The blood sugar management took my fasting insulin from pre-diabetic levels to extremely healthy while also reducing my blood sugar levels. What I'm saying is that it works. No snake oil ingredients. We even have a Learn More page that links to various studies proving ingredient efficacy. On top of the massive sale, we're also launching 4 new supplements. The Ultimate Cholesterol Support to improve your cardiovascular health, the Ultimate Ashwagandha Complex to increase testosterone even further and reduce stress, the Ultimate Travel Support, which is the only supplement you need to bring on holidays, and kind of acts like an ultra multivitamin, and my personal favorite, the Ultimate Sleep Support. The sleep support is fucking amazing. It boosted my REM and deep sleep by 30% and reduced time to sleep by 60%. Trust me, if you struggle to sleep or stay asleep or wake up feeling shit, the sleep support will be fucking life-changing. Link is below. Give the subs a go. Shit is elite. Today we'll go through each Space Marine Legion's greatest weaknesses, discussing how it was exploited, the consequence they faced from their weakness, and the steps they took to correct it, if any. Let's get into it. The Dark Angels are one of the most well-rounded of all Space Marine legions, thus they were one of the most feared, successful, and deadly. However, their weaknesses were born of their mistrust of themselves and others. They were so secretive, even before all the fallen nonsense, that no one really trusted them and they didn't trust anyone else. People were confused on what the Line was trying to do during the heresy, so found him hard to work with the Dark Angels being considered just as much of a wildcard as the White Scars. The consequence of that is that the Dark Angels had way less of an impact on the heresy than they could have, as well as losing Caliban and a huge chunk of the Legion and even their Primarch. Their mistrusting ways continues to plague them even 10,000 years later. The Emperor's children have as many weaknesses as China has people. Ass, tits, 9-year-olds, 8-year-olds, men, women, corpses, coke, heroin, bad music. Anything you shouldn't have a weakness for, other than ass or tits of course, they have. In a more practical sense, they're extremely selfish and self-centered, often a tactical liability when working with other Chaos forces, as they will pursue what makes them feel good as opposed to tactical advantages. For example, during the Siege of Terra, after one defeat from assaulting the walls, they decided to abandon the siege and just focus on raping and pillaging the civilian population, which although awful, didn't do much for the traitor's cause. The Emperor's children are also easy to bait into traps due to their arrogance, with thousands dying from such traps that other legions would have avoided. Their Primarch also mostly abandoned them, causing the legion to fracture into rival warbands. As a consequence, the Emperor's children have been one of the least effective traitor legions in the current setting. The Iron Warriors are actually pretty solid and objectively don't have many weaknesses. You could argue mobile warfare isn't their specialty, but they do love their tanks, and just because they would lose a jet bike battle to the White Scars doesn't mean it's necessarily a weakness. No, I think their main weakness is just how big of assholes they are to each other and everyone else. They hold next to no love for their fellow battle brothers, with Perturabo happy to throw his sons into meat grinders. No one in turn liked Perturabo and just tried to use him as a tool, which caused a lot of issues such as the Iron Warriors abandoning the Siege of Terra halfway through, as well as the Iron Warriors having intense rivalries with each other and struggling to come together in large numbers. The White Scars are the most clear-cut with their weaknesses. Any sort of pitch battle, siege defense, attrition warfare, they are pretty shit at. Even their logistics were fucking awful until a woman called Ilia Revalian joined the Legion and whipped them into shape. The White Scars are the kings of hit and run, mobile, fast-paced warfare. No one can come close, but you put 2 trench lines in front of each other and they are fucked. Unless of course they just storm the enemy trench and kill them all, which is exactly what they would do. The thing is, the White Scars know about their weakness and mitigate it heavily. During the Siege of Terra, they very rarely sat on the walls. That was the job for the Imperial Fists. Instead, they were constantly sallying forth, always counterattacking, which the traitors didn't expect, so it was wildly effective. The Space Wolves' weakness is a bit more obvious than most. They are overly aggressive and often pick fights they cannot win. They only beat the Thousand Sons because of the Custodians and Sisters of Silence intervening. They lost to the Sons of Horus and Lima nearly died. They barely escaped the Alpha Legion fleet. They would have been slaughtered by the traitor legions during their last stand if Corvus hadn't arrived and saved them. They always punch above their weight and they don't think things through, often rarely considering the bigger picture or long-term planning. If anything, they often just succeed because they are so fucking girthy, which is their strength. Like, their weakness is countered by the fact that they are so bloody tough. However, the consequences to their weakness was screwing up during the heresy and causing more problems than solutions. Funnily enough, the Imperial Fist's greatest weakness was also their greatest strength, their stubbornness. These guys were so fucking stubborn, it's wild. They will hold the line until the line itself has been smashed apart, and even then they'll keep holding it. For siege defense, this is amazing and has won their battles against near impossible odds. However, it has also unnecessarily killed a shitload of Imperial Fists. The Iron Cage disaster was bred from Rogel Dawn's stubbornness, with even Imperial Fist successor chapters, like the Black Templars, showing just as much stubbornness as their founding legion. They don't really mitigate it, they're just stubborn, and generally it works out more times than it doesn't. The Night Lords are one of the most specialized legions of all. They're extremely good at terror tactics, often able to think outside the box and surprise their opponents, but in literally all other aspects they are weak. Fair pitch battles, they're fucked. Space battle engagements, fucked. Sieges, fucked. Anytime they can't just scare you to death or ambush you, they are fucked. For example, on Sotha, a huge army of Night Lords were held off and smashed by a tiny contingent of Guardsmen, Ultramarines, and Imperial Fists. Likewise, they were crushed during the Thramis Crusade and then smashed again during the Siege of Zagwelsa. And in the current setting, they exist as a scattering of weak warbands. And this is coming from someone that loves the Night Lords. They just spec way too hard into one attribute. The Blood Angels are incredibly well-rounded. Even their weakness of the Black Rage has been turned into a strength by them using Berserker Death Companies to great effect. Their martial skill is astounding, their ferocity near unmatched, their logistics and tactical acumen brilliant. They have had their honorable noble ways exploited and used against them by dirty fighters like the Night Lords in the past, but the Blood Angels aren't opposed to letting their insane Black Rage brothers rip you limb from limb if you piss them off enough. So yeah, I guess the Red Thirst and Black Rage are weaknesses, but since those weaknesses have been mostly mitigated, it explains why the Blood Angels are some of the most effective loyalists in the entire galaxy. The Iron Hands can be summed up by saying that they do not bend, they break. They will be unbelievably stoic, powerful, and unmovable, until you fuck them hard enough that they shatter and become a bunch of raging retards. After Ferrus died, the Iron Hands became an insanely effective guerrilla force that attacked traitor supply lines, doing the damage of a legion with only a fraction of that. However, there was a huge cultural divide within them. Some Iron Hands wanted to abandon the heresy and go into isolation. Others wanted to reform the legion and stand by their loyalist brothers on Terra. The divide was so great that the ones that wanted to abandon the heresy betrayed the others, fucked their war effort, and got a bunch of them killed. Their distaste for flesh and weakness is in itself a weakness, making them extremely rigid, unversatile, and exploitable, which explains why they're such a minor footnote in the current setting. For the World Eaters, it's an easy one. Their extreme rage and berserker tendencies means they basically just bum rush the enemy with no heed for their safety. Their logistics are also a total mess, so have a lot of issues with resupply and recruitment. Not to mention they're always killing each other in gladiatorial matches. Now, there is very little that can defeat a World Eater charge if it crashes into your lines, as they try to let their strengths overshadow their weaknesses. However, there isn't many World Eaters left in the setting, and there's no surprise why. During the Siege of Terra, they racked up both the highest kill and highest death tally of all the legions present. The Ultramarines are extremely well-rounded. They are not the best at anything beyond logistics, which to be fair is super important in war, but they are also not the worst at anything. Some people may think they're too organized and rigid, allowing for creative methods to exploit them, but this isn't the case. The Ultramarines are extremely adaptable, versatile, and creative themselves. This versatility allowed them to counterattack and win the war on Calth despite such a devastating start. It's also why they managed to counter both the World Eaters and Wordbearers during the Shadow Crusade and still be considered so deadly that the traitors were trying to rush the Siege of Terra to avoid being caught between the Ultramarines and the defenders on Terra. If one legion was said to be without true weakness, it would be the Ultramarines. The Death Guard, even before they became Plague Marines, were implacable, like a slow-moving but inevitable tide of death. They were resilient as hell. However, since becoming Plague Marines, their strengths have become stronger, but as did their weaknesses, that being them being incredibly slow. They move slow, they attack slow. Sure, it's awesome to be able to tank 5 times more bolt rounds than a normal Space Marine, but if every bolt lands because you move slow and can't dodge for shit, then you'll still die, especially when compared to the White Scars who can can dodge and weave. The Death Guard are easily outmaneuvered, and it was really fascinating seeing them go up against the White Scars, two entirely different strengths and weaknesses, resilient but slow versus fragile but fast. The winner was the White Scars, who ensured the battle would be fought on their terms. The Thousand Sons are another easy one, with their strength being their mastery of the warp also being their weakness. The Thousand Sons had the most potential of all legions, but they were crushed first. That is because when their strength was taken away via the Sisters of Silence, they were literally just weak. They aren't very good warriors without the warp. As soon as the warp was gone, the wolves tore into them. Their reliance on the warp also created another weakness, the flesh change, which was fixed by turning most of them into dusty zombie robot automata. Yeah, the Thousand Sons are a mess, mostly because they used the warp as a crutch. The Sons of Horus were often cited as the greatest of all legions, but they were also the only legion to actually go extinct and become disbanded. So what happened? Well, despite their might and power, it was their hubris and feeling of superiority that ended them. The Saturnine Gambit was the best example. The best and brightest of the Sons of Horus thought they could end the siege in a single decapitation strike, but instead lost literally all of their named characters and elite units by Abaddon. Post-heresy, everyone blamed them and turned on them, with the Sons of Horus feeling directionless and even turning to possession via demons for some reason. If Abaddon never came back to lead them, it's likely pretty much the entire bloodline would have died out. The Wordbearers, when actually put to the task, were a mighty legion. However, in a similar way to how the Thousand Sons relied on the warp, the Wordbearers began relying too much on their demonic allies. They stopped trying to solve things using tactics, logistics, and brilliance, and instead were like, how many demons can we throw at this problem? Which does work, unless you cannot summon demons at the time, or those demons are being assholes, which is pretty common. In the lore, whenever the Wordbearers didn't have help from their demonic allies, they got fucked on extremely hard. The Salamanders were pretty fiery, but may have specced a bit too hard into that short-range combustible combat style. They always fought at close range despite not having the same ferocity as the World Eaters or Space Wolves. They were also maybe too compassionate for the innocent, making them exploitable by doing fucked up war crimes on civilians. In saying that, the Salamanders didn't have anything too obvious in the weakness department, maybe their overall small legion size even prior to the Horus Heresy. The Raven Guard were the masters of stealth and shock and awe. They almost became deadlier after they lost most of their legion in the Isfahan Dropsite Massacre, as breaking up into smaller warbands suited their style greatly. However, on the flip side, asking them to hold the line like an Imperial Fist would be a terrible idea, which was evident when Horus ordered the Raven Guard to hold Gate 42 during the Great Crusade, causing mass casualties as the Raven Guard were completely out of their element. Now for the Alpha Legion. Although masters of deception and sabotage, the Alpha Legion is actually pretty well rounded. Their ultimate weakness is making things overly complicated. They would rather choose a more difficult, costly, and risky solution because of style points rather than what is most obvious and easy. Now this is cool, but it's also cost them a lot. Alfarius died doing this, as has dozens of thousands of other Alpha Legionnaires. In the current setting, they're so confused and divided over what they're supposed to be doing that they are now made up of dozens of different warbands with different objectives. So just remember, whenever you feel shit about yourself, even demigod super soldiers from the 42nd millennium aren't perfect. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up some Natty Plus supplements, up to 45% off store-wide, best time to try them. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.